Russia, the largest country in the world, home to beautiful monuments built out of the frozen landscape of northern Europe. But out of this beauty also came revolution. Blood-stained and war-torn, this country arose with a new government by communist rule. But this is also the place where one of communism's greatest detractors, Ayn Rand, called home. So, what makes one want to rise up against their own nation, criticizing its government and practices? What makes a citizen hate their own country? How was Ayn Rand born? Ayn Rand was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, on February 2nd, 1905. During her teenage years, she witnessed terrible atrocities of the Russian Revolution. This is what spurred her on towards objectivism. She recognized that neither one of the two groups, the Red Army nor the White Army, valued the individual. During this time of revolt and war, her father's pharmacy was confiscated by the communist government, and her family was near starvation. That same year in school, she began to study American history and automatically became fascinated with the idea of America as a model of a free country.
I was in my early teens during the Russian Civil War. I lived in a small town that changed hands many times. When it was occupied by the White Army, I almost longed for the return of the Red Army and vice versa. There was not much difference between them in practice, but there was in theory. The Red Army stood for totalitarian dictatorship and rule by terror. The White Army stood for nothing. Repeat, nothing. In answer to the monstrous evil they were fighting, the Whites found nothing better to proclaim than the dustiest, smelliest bromides of the time. We must fight, they said, for Holy Mother Russia, for faith and tradition.
After the Russian Revolution, she entered the University of Petrograd to study philosophy and history. Graduating in 1924, she experienced the disintegration of the right to free speech and the takeover of the university by communist thugs and officials. In 1925, she decided to leave Soviet Russia and go to the U.S. She arrived in New York City in February 1926. From here, she was able to freely practice and articulate her beliefs. This belief being in objectivism, or the right of the individual to control his or her own life.
History out, because I feel like people don't know some of the history, that this is someone who came from communism, who came to love America and capitalism, sort of living for yourself, which is a lot of what objectivism is. So now let's unpack objectivism a little bit. There are 5 pillars, and give me the broadest objectivist.
Sure. So objectivism on what foot kind of is in metaphysics, which is the alien philosophy that studies what is out there, what is reality about. It's reality is what it is. A is A, kind of law of identity, the law of causality, Aristotle's view of the metaphysical nature of reality. Reality is not created by another being. It's not what we want it to be. It's not what we wish it to be. It's not what some external consciousness created. It just is.
It's here and now.
It's here and now. We have, and this is kind of the epistemology, we have the tool to know it. We have senses to observe it. We have reason to be able to integrate it, understand it, and actually ultimately shape it. It's not a creation of our consciousness. It's not a creation of our emotions. The way you learn about reality is not through emotions. It's through reason. It's through science. It's through using, what's uniquely human, which is our reasoning capacity, our rational thinking, our senses, and our senses of valid. Now, thinking having reason, being rational, is a characteristic of the individual. We don't have a collective stomach to eat. We don't have a collective mind to think. Only individuals can think. So the unit in ethics is the individual. The purpose of ethics is to provide guidance for the individual on how to live the best life that he can live. What values and virtues to pursue to live a great life, and to live a life consistent with our nature as human beings, as rational, reasoning beings. So ethics is not about teaching us how to sacrifice for other people and how to die for them, but it's also not about getting other people to sacrifice for us and exploiting other people. It's about living a full, rational life.
Right.
Ayn Rand develops her thoughts on the individual and reason in two of her novels, Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. The Fountainhead can be specifically related to her value of objectivism through the character of Howard Roark. Roark embodies the individual, not letting anyone or anything change his motives from himself. In the novel, he struggles against people such as Ellsworth Toohey, who, like Lenin in the early 1900s, vouches for collectivism and socialist ideals only to grab power for himself. This value of objectivism is not only applicable to the Russian Revolution, but to modern times as well. Two examples being the minimum wage and public housing in Dallas, Texas.
So this is where you would say that we care sort of more about feelings over fact. Sometimes things will feel right to us. It seems right to say, well, the minimum wage should be $15 because you want people that are low income to make more money. That feels right, but it may not actually be what the system itself can negotiate.
Well, it's not what happens in reality. That is, and this is what people call unintended consequences. I'm not sure they're always unintended, but the unintended consequences is if you think a little bit more about the problem, and let's take the minimum wage. If you raise the price artificially, we all studied in Econ 101 when a price is raised, demand goes down. So if you raise the price of labor, then demand for that labor goes down. And this happens over and over again. But people don't want to believe that, but they also don't want to take the inductive evidence. That is, the fact that it's happened 100 times. Oh, but this time it's going to be different. And I see that in economics all the time. The Paul Krugmans of the world, stimulus never works. It's never worked. That's because it hasn't been big enough. We need to do bigger. And it's never going to work because they keep loading it up like that. And the same with the minimum wage. They keep thinking this time will be different. But that's anti-reason. It's anti-science. And what they're placing is wishes before facts, wishes before solid, theoretical theory that was derived from evidence from reality. I mean, that's the real scientific method.
The second example is of Dallas, Texas, where recently, just like in the Fountainhead with the Cortland Homes project, the government is trying to build public housing. Paul Sperry, writer for the New York Post, stated that Obama's last act is to force suburbs to be less white and less wealthy. Hillary's rumored running mate, Housing Secretary Julian Castro, is cooking up a scheme to reallocate funding for Section 8 housing to punish suburbs for being too white and too wealthy. The scheme involves supersizing vouchers to help urban poor afford higher rates in pricey areas such as New York's Westchester County, while assigning them government real estate agents called mobility counselors to secure housing in the suburbs. Castro plans to launch the Section 8 reboot this fall, even though a similar program tested a few years ago in Dallas has been blamed for shifting violent crime to affluent neighborhoods. Thus, socialism and capitalism are still affecting our world today and are still at war with each other. Ayn Rand, the girl who grew up hating her own country, and her views are still beneficial for us to remember today. Today, in our own everyday decisions, and also in our decisions on who we vote for president or for what laws we are in favor of.